Whoa, that's quite a grip.
See, Marge? Strangling the boy has paid off. Just kidding. I don't do that anymore. Times have changed.
Now we're gonna get into things, but first, I want to ask people: Do you still watch The Simpsons? I'm not gonna do the thing where to dismiss the show, I say nobody watches The Simpsons anymore. Obviously, people still watch it; it's still airing, but I don't know anybody who watches it. Like, what even is the main demographic of people who watch The Simpsons now? I don't know. I suppose I have questions. But in any case, let's talk about it. The Simpsons, probably the quintessential example of a show that has continued long past when it should have been canceled, specifically because there's clearly no creative spark or love left within the team that is responsible for producing the show. But still, like 30 seasons on, the people over at Fox insist on keeping the mangled body of this series on life support in order to squeeze out as many dollars as they can from the IP. I used to love The Simpsons. Really, I did. It was a huge part of my childhood growing up. And actually, I remember watching the show being way younger than I should have been. I think my parents were kind of those people who initially saw a cartoon and assumed it must be okay for kids, which obviously, if you know The Simpsons, is not necessarily the case. I mean, it's not the worst thing out there. It's not like it's South Park, but still not necessarily something I would let my 10-year-old watch. And credit where it's due, regardless of what I think of the show now, there are just so many great episodes out there in the Simpsons catalog. And I actually think I enjoyed the show for a way longer run than a lot of people. A lot of people say, oh yeah, after the 5th, maybe even 8th season, the show went downhill. I was watching and enjoying The Simpsons up until like the 16th season. And even though I don't watch the show anymore, I feel like I should still call myself a Simpsons fan, because I mean, you can't just erase like 18 seasons of great content because what they're doing now is ridiculous. That said, though, the news we're covering today is just the perfect illustration of why I and so many other fans of the show think it's now a shadow of its former self. Obviously, you saw the clip at the top of this video. We also have this headline from People. Homer Simpson declares he won't strangle Bart anymore on The Simpsons. Times have changed. Even for people who don't actually watch The Simpsons, I feel like Homer strangling Bart is just such an iconic part of the show. It leaked out into mainstream culture. The classic, why you little... And then Bart going, ah, ah, ah. Please don't take that clip of me strangling myself and turn it into an unflattering GIF, internet. It's just one of the show's many classic gags, and because I feel like I need to spell it out nowadays, the whole point of Homer strangling Bart wasn't a message saying, hey, strangling your child is a good thing, because I don't think that, and I don't think the people who wrote the show think that. The point of The Simpsons, though, at least when the show started way back when, was that it was supposed to be almost a caricature, a representation of all the unflattering aspects of family life that back in the day, TV shows wouldn't actually show. So very different from the families that you might see on, for instance, Full House. The Simpsons weren't afraid to be rude, to be crude, and yes, show the ugly parts, including in an exaggerated form of what a lot of American families were like. This includes things like Homer's alcoholism, which again, alcoholism, that's not a joke, a funny thing in itself, or something like Homer strangling Bart. And again, the joke is not, hey, it's funny to strangle a child. The joke instead is, look at how flawed the Simpsons are, especially contrasted with, at the time, the picture perfect families that were on other TV shows. But of course, as even that Simpsons clip expresses, yeah, it's true, times have changed. And nowadays, it's not exactly a novel thing to see an imperfect family on TV. In fact, I'd say that's actually the norm now. Nowadays, if you want to actually think outside the box, you'd put a family that does happily love each other and get along on TV. That's now breaking the mold. When it comes to strangling Bart, though, after this clip of The Simpsons started to go viral on social media, because, and I feel like I do need to point this out, I think most of the people who are talking about this admittedly haven't watched the show in a while, and I include myself in that. Even before this joke was made, the reality was that, yeah, Homer just wasn't strangling Bart on screen as much as he used to. As People explains, although Homer only recently declared he wouldn't throttle his 10-year-old toon son, the TV dad hasn't actually done so in several years. According to ING, Homer last strangled Bart on screen during the show's 31st season, which aired from 2019 to 2020. Maybe you guys are going to disagree with me, and I would love to hear about it if you do. But in my opinion, the problem here isn't necessarily that Homer isn't going to be strangling Bart anymore. It's not like Homer strangling Bart was the only funny part of The Simpsons, or even the funniest part of The Simpsons. And like I said, considering that originally the humor behind behind Homer strangling Bart was the fact that it contrasted so starkly with other shows at the time. But now, obviously, 30 years later, other shows are different. Mainstream media is different. And so I think there is an argument to be made that because times have changed, the humor there, the shock factor there, it just no longer exists like it used to. And so maybe it doesn't make sense to do that same old gag anymore. That's all fine and I can understand that. But my concern is that the reason why Homer is no longer strangling Bart is actually because the writers of the show don't want to be deemed problematic. And the fact that the people behind The Simpsons would even think of catering to such politically correct notions as they have done in the past, well, that's the problem here. I've seen a lot of people in light of this news lament that, oh, this is The Simpsons going woke, but it's like, no guys, The Simpsons went woke a long time ago. There are many individual episodes of The Simpsons that illustrate this, but probably the situation that most of you are familiar with that is an example of, yes, The Simpsons embracing progressive ideology was the recasting of Apu. This is an old controversy that I'm sure a lot of you have already heard of, but to bring some of you up to speed really quick, essentially Apu, the beloved Indian character of the show, he originally was not voiced by an Indian person. He was voiced by a white guy. Of course, now within the past few years, as a society, we have decided that actually, if you are voicing a character, you better be of that same race. And that's not to mention the fact that a lot of people, and by a lot of people, I mean like 5 people on Twitter, they felt that actually Apu was a negative stereotype of Indian culture and people. And I mean, yeah, it could be argued and has been argued correctly, I'd say, that most characters on The Simpsons are caricatures or stereotypes of other types of races or people, or whatever. For Apu specifically, I think it was the accusations of caricature plus the fact that he was voiced by a white guy. There was just a lot of negative backlash. Again, we're basically just talking about online here. That, as People Once More explains, Hank Azaria, who originally voiced him, he stepped down from the role in January 2020, noting that it was the right thing to do. And now I don't know if this has changed since this article is written, but it was at the time noted that the part had yet to be recast, with Apu only making background appearances in the years that followed. I really didn't know any better, Azaria said on the Armchair Expert podcast in April 2021. I didn't think about it. I was unaware how much relative advantage I'd received in this country as a white kid from Queens. Just because there were good intentions, it doesn't mean there weren't real negative consequences to the thing that I am accountable for. And then after Azaria stepping down from the role of Apu, eventually it was announced that The Simpsons would no longer do colorblind voice casting for its characters. It was reported The Simpsons will no longer cast white actors to voice characters of color. Fox confirmed the news in a statement to People, saying, moving forward, The Simpsons will no longer have white actors voice non-white characters. Look, ultimately, whether it be certain actors voicing different characters or Homer choosing not to strangle Bart, the people over at The Simpsons creative team, they can do whatever they want. It's their show. But if you ask me, perhaps the show would be a little better served with these creatives spending less time worrying about what activists online think of the show and more time actually breaking these expectations and these norms in order to provide cutting and relevant social commentary that could also be really funny, i.e. what made the show popular in the first place. I feel like The Simpsons is a good example of that saying, if you live long enough as the hero, you eventually become the villain. I probably butchered that, but you guys know what I mean. In any case, that's basically all I have to say for now. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time.